So there's science, there's philosophy. Science looks at things a different way than philosophy looks at things. Stephen Hawking said that philosophy is dead.
Well, that remark is probably not intended as a compliment, but it's not exactly clear what he means. Now, you could interpret that claim as saying that no philosophical discoveries have ever been made and no philosophical discoveries ever will be made, and that is easily refuted, right? Because you can just say, well, what about ethics? I think that we want to interpret him as saying something a little less extreme than that. And maybe the interpretation that is most fair is that the more speculative branches of philosophy are useless and maybe ruining what's good about philosophy.
Mm.
Now, a lot of philosophers have been like anti-meta physicians.
Mm.
Nietzsche's one, maybe Wittgenstein, maybe even Hume. Just to be against metaphysics, right? Metaphysics is, what is there in the deepest sense? The structure of reality. So to be against metaphysics is not particularly groundbreaking.
Mm.
So when Hawking says philosophy is dead, for me, there is a bit of a puzzle about what he means and why he is saying it. Now, I think that in actual fact, he's being provocative,
Mm.
and that the book, The Grand Design, is it's designed to get people's attention. Now, when you say a person is dead, you know what they mean, right?
Mm.
A person's not going to wake up. Well, to say a discipline is dead, it doesn't necessarily have to be that the discipline is done, right?
Well, well, I think what he could mean is that he probably viewed philosophy as like a spiritual outlook on the world. Science has a way of testing it, and we now know more concrete, real ideas. We can use science to make things like cell phones, TVs, whereas philosophy studies ideas. I think they just look at two different things, and I don't. I think maybe he just misunderstands philosophy.
Yes. And what is philosophy? Like, it's not an easy question. You could ask a professional philosopher, what is philosophy? And they're going to go, well, and I have my own answer, and it's maybe quite complicated, but philosophy is complicated. Um, so there are other critics of philosophy too. Like, there's Lawrence Krauss, uh, Neil deGrasse Tyson, right, and then Bill Nye, and some of these guys retracted what they were saying. Um, Bill Nye retracted what he was saying. Uh, Lawrence Krauss kind of backed up most of it, So it's not really like philosophy is in a particularly bad way because of the because of the things that these prominent scientists and science communicators are saying. Now, I think philosophy is probably struggling in the academy, and often you hear about philosophy departments being cut, and that's probably not a good thing. Now, we should talk about like what's distinctive about philosophy, right?
Mm.
And strictly speaking, if I can give you one philosophical finding that is indispensable and it really belongs to philosophy, then philosophy is not dead, right? I mean, I joke in the body of the text that perhaps Stephen Hawking thinks that it's dead, but he thinks that his book is like a miraculous resurrection of philosophy.
Mm.
But he is obviously going to think, well, philosophy needs to be more like scientific in its orientation. Now, obviously, only an idiot would disrespect science and the scientific method, right? There's no argument there. And when science communicators like pick on philosophy, it definitely has to a philosopher. It kind of looks like, well, why can't you be as clever as your older brother or your
Mm.
older sister? And that kind of talk can leave lasting damage on children. But adults, well-adjusted adults, enjoy hearing that their siblings are thriving, right? So philosophy wants the best for science. But philosophy also wants a seat at the table. Philosophy also can bring something distinctive and helpful. And, so we can start listing these things.
So you could sum up that philosophy and science actually works together. There was a line in the Jurassic Park movie where he said you spent so much time wondering if you could actually create dinosaurs that you didn't spend enough time thinking that whether or not you should.
I mean, David Hume could have said that, right? Because it's the fact-value distinction. And that's... I mean, if I'm going to give someone a quick and dirty case study of indispensable philosophy, Hume's fact-value distinction is going to be right there. And the Euthyphro dilemma also. And the Euthyphro dilemma is about ethics, but it's about grounding, right? So the Euthyphro dilemma says, is it good because God commends it, or does God commend it because it's good? And what you realize is that, well, if it's good because God commends it, there's like arbitrary and capricious, and if God commends it because it's good, well, ethics has a kind of independent life. And that's metaphysics, right? And I think that there's nothing spooky about that. It's really important to get this kind of secular metaphysics of, we're doing a priori philosophy, right? We didn't do an experiment in the lab, but we still discovered something interesting. Now, the full story of like why philosophy is indispensable is much deeper than that, right? I think that philosophy not just tells you about like what to care about, but like what there really is, right? And obviously science is gonna be gathering the data, right? Philosophy is not going to do that. Philosophy doesn't do experiments, but philosophy is going to be interpreting the data, right? So I give an analogy for this, and the analogy is, well, suppose I offer you a note, right, and a dollar bill or a $20 bill, and I say, here's the $20 bill, and you go, that's just a piece of paper, that's not a note, right? I go, no, it exists, look, I'm holding it. And we go, that's ridiculous, what you're holding is a piece of paper, right? So there's a lot in that analogy, actually, right? And then the inversion of that is, well, suppose that I'm the cashier and you're the customer, and you try and pay on your credit card, and I say, no, that's not, I need money I can hold, right? Well, that mistake is, well, roughly like how I interpret empiricists, who kind of have this prejudice against things that they can't see and things that they can't touch. And I guess I should also back up and say, well, in the case of ethics, right, if you're a moral anti-realist and you think that every fictional statement is like either false or meaningless, you're still confronted with a philosophical decision that you have to make, right? Well, how am I going to treat ethical questions and ethical problems? How do I treat moral disagreement if there are no facts of the matter? So you don't get out of it that way, and philosophy remains indispensable there. Now, there's definitely a thread. So it's not just about what is important, right? Metaphysics is interesting too, and even despite Hume's fact-value gap, ethical statements and factual statements are related in some way, because, I mean, facts about like biological needs, facts about history, facts about what people know and are capable of, well, these all inform ethical judgments, right? So there are morally relevant facts, and Hume's fact-value distinction doesn't threaten like the reality of ethics, although it is often interpreted as doing that.